Hussein, the floor is yours.
I am trying to connect my webcam on. Now it's possible.
Yes. Yes. We
Now,
can see you.
now I am sharing my screen. I hope that you can see that.
Take your time.
Now, is it possible to see the screen of my PowerPoint?
Indeed it is.
Thank you. In the name of Allah the Almighty, hello everyone, and thank you for being here today. My name is Hossein Azani, a student of private law at Islamic Azad University, Science and Research Branch in Tehran. The topic of my presentation is shared concept of imamate in 12-er Shiism and Sunnism. The concept of imamate has been one of the most critical and contentious issues throughout Islamic history. It was the first theological debate in Islam and has remained a highly sensitive and dynamic topic across various periods and geographical regions. But can the differing understandings of imamate in Shiism and Sunnism, the two main and often competing sects of Islam, share any fundamental similarities? This is the question I aim to address in today's presentation. This question initially took shape during a class where my professor was discussing the comparative study of imamate in Sunni and Shi'i thought. He presented some of Ibn Taymiyyah's, a prominent Sunni jurist and theologian, ideas on imamate, as articulated in his work السياسة الشرعية في إصلاح الراعي والرعية. I have brought a relevant excerpt from this text, which provides insight into the Sunni perspective on leadership and governance. Now I am reading on the Ibn Taymiyyah's text. Ruling over the affairs of people is one of the greatest obligations in religion, and neither religion nor worldly life can be properly established without it. Humanity's well-being depends on cooperation, as people need each other, helping one another to bring benefits and support one another to ward off harm. An individual alone cannot secure all their benefits or protect themselves from all harms. When people come together, there must be a leader. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, if three people set out on a journey, then they should appoint one of them as a leader, as narrated by Abu Dawud from the hadith of Abu Sa'id and Abu Hurairah. Imam Ahmad also reported in his Musnad from Ibn Amr, may Allah be pleased with them, that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, it is not permissible for three people to be in a deserted place without appointing one of them as a leader. The Prophet, peace be upon him, made it obligatory to appoint a leader even for a small temporary gathering on a journey, thereby emphasizing the importance of leadership for all other types of gathering, which are greater and more enduring. Moreover, Allah has commanded the enjoining of good and forbidding of evil, al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahy al-munkar, and this cannot be achieved without authority and leadership. The same applies to all other obligations like jihad, justice, the establishment of Hajj, Friday prayers, and festival, supporting the oppressed, and implementing legal punishments. None of these can be realized without strength and leadership. This is why it has been narrated that the ruler is the shade of God on earth, and it is said 60 years under a tyrannical ruler are better than a single night without a ruler. These ideas suggest a quotation of Ibn Taymiyyah is done. These ideas suggest a framework of authority and leadership that is not exclusively spiritual but deeply tied to governance and political order. Sorry. Yes. Uh, During that same, now I am reading on another text. During that same discussion, sorry, here I'm not reading on another quotation. During that same discussion, I was reminded of lectures on the thoughts of Imam Khomeini, the leader of Iranian 1979 Islamic Revolution, particularly his arguments regarding Wilayat al-Faqih, guardianship of the jurist, and the necessity of establishing a government. I found a passage in his book Kitab al-Bay that strikingly resembles what Ibn Taymiyyah had articulated. Now I am reading on the Imam Khomeini's text. Divine laws, whether they pertain or financial matters, politics, or rights, have not been abrogated, rather, they remain in effect until the day of judgment. The very permanence of these laws necessitates the existence of a government and authority that ensures the preservation of divine laws, sovereignty, and guarantees its implementation. Without such governance, the enforcement of God's laws would be impossible, leading to chaos and disorder. Moreover, maintaining order is one of the most essential duties, and the disruption of the affairs of Muslims is a matter greatly despised. This cannot be addressed, nor can these issues be resolved without a ruler and a government. In addition, the protection of Muslim brothers from invasion and the defense of their lands against aggression is a duty both rationally and religiously. And this cannot be achieved without forming a government. These are among the clearest needs of Muslims, and it is inconceivable that the wise Creator would neglect such matters. The same argument that proves the necessity of imamate also establishes the need for government after the occultation of the imam. May God hasten his reappearance, especially considering that this period may extend for many years, potentially, God forbid, even thousands of years, as only God knows. Can the wisdom of the all-wise Creator allow for the neglect of the Islamic community, failing to assign them clear responsibilities? Would a wise being be content with chaos, disorder, and the breakdown of the system without establishing a decisive law to remove any excuse, so that people cannot claim they had no guidance from God? What we have mentioned, even though it is self-evident to reason, underscores the necessity of government for the establishment of justice, education, and upbringing, maintaining order, eradicating oppression, securing borders, and preventing foreign aggression. These are among the most obvious judgments of reason, without distinction between one era or place and another. Furthermore, religious evidence supports this as well. In the book of Al-Wafi of Faiz al-Kashani, a chapter is dedicated to the idea that there is nothing people need except that there is a provision for it in the Quran or Sunnah, and it includes several narrations. Before this slide, I suspect that had not I mentioned this expert was from a Shia jurist, you might have thought I was continuing with a passage from Ibn Taymiyyah. This similarity raised intriguing questions for me about whether there are deeper, more fundamental commonalities in how both traditions conceptualize leadership and governance. Debates about imamate and leadership in Islam are not just historical or theological matters. They have direct implications for the social, political, and cultural structures of Muslim societies today. This is why examining these concepts along with their similarities and differences can provide a better understanding of the challenges faced by contemporary Muslim communities. For instance, in Saudi Arabia, Quranic verses like "Obey Allah, obey the Messenger, and those authority among you" are often used to promote the authority of the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. In Libya, Muhammad al-Qaddafi's propaganda clearly had religious undertones. Muqtada al-Sadr in Iraq does not prevent his name from being mentioned during the call to prayer, al-Adhan. The revival of Hagia Sophia as a mosque in Turkey was a step towards reclaiming the legacy of the Islamic Caliphate, and perhaps most notably, at least for those from previous generations, the 1979 Iranian Revolution, which established a political system based on Shia jurisprudence, is a clear demonstration of how these theological concepts remain relevant today. These are all examples of how Islamic texts and jurisprudential interpretations continue to shape modern political and social realities. The goal of this research is to compare the concepts of imamate in 12-verse Shiism and Sunnism and to identify any fundamental similarities between these two interpretations. This was achieved through the study of Quranic verses, prophetic traditions, and the combination of legal and historical analysis. Naturally, apart from the Quran, we need to refer to hadith collections, theological texts, and jurisprudential sources. For the sake of this presentation, I will not delve into extensive citation or attempt to exhaustively cover every source, as that would be unnecessarily lengthy and beyond our scope here. Additionally, even within each sect, there are minor differences that do not fundamentally alter the overall discussion. My approach is descriptive and analytical, offering an objective review of these texts without infusing my personal or critical viewpoints. To start, let's discuss the concept of imamate in 12-verse Shiism. In Shia thought, imamate is much more than political leadership. It's a divinely appointed role encompassing both spiritual guidance and legislative authority. Shia theology holds that an imam is chosen by God and must possess special attributes such as infallibility, divine knowledge, and moral perfection. The imam serves as a continuation of the prophetic mission, guiding people in all aspects of life, including their spiritual, ethical, and social duties. This concept of imamate is seen as necessary for the preservation of religious teaching and spiritual development of the community. This understanding reflects the 12-verse Shia belief that true leadership cannot be left to human choice alone, but must be based on a divine selection to ensure the continuity of Islamic principles and values. In terms of function, the Shia Imam has several essential roles. First, he is the interpreter of divine law, guiding believers in their religious obligations. Second, he acts as a moral exemplar for the community, embodying the highest ethical standards that believers are encouraged to follow. The Imam is also responsible for protecting the community from theological deviation and ensuring justice. Shia Muslims believe that authority of the Imam is absolute and not limited to spiritual matters but extends to governance and law. This notion of imamate highlights a comprehensive leadership role which, according to Shi'i tradition, remains valid until the Day of Judgment. The Quran provides fundamental verses that Shi'i scholars use to support the concept of imamate. One key verse is Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 124, where God says to Abraham, I am making you the Imam of mankind. The interpretation views this verse as establishing the divine principle of leadership. Another important verse is Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 55. Your guardian is only Allah, His apostle or His messenger, and the faithful who maintain the prayer and give the zakat while bowing down. Shi'i tradition interprets those who bow as referring specifically to Ali, the Prophet's cousin, who is seen as the first Imam. Through these and other verses, like Surah Yasin, verse 12, the Quranic foundation for Shi'i imamate is laid, framing the Imam as both a spiritual and social leader chosen by divine command. In addition to Quranic evidence, Shi'i beliefs in imamate draws significantly from prophetic tradition. The most famous of these is the Hadith of Qadir, where the Prophet is reported to have said, "For whoever I am his leader, Ali is his leader." This statement is interpreted by Shi'i scholars as a declaration of Ali's divine appointment as the first Imam. Another key tradition is the Hadith of the 12 successors, which is found in both Shi'i and Sunni successors, whereas Sunnis cannot count them among their caliphs. This Hadith states that there will be 12 leaders from the Quraysh after the Prophet, and in Shi'i thought these leaders are the 12 Imams. These traditions, besides others, as hadith of position that says, "O Ali, you stand to me as Aaron stood to Moses, except that there will be no prophet after me," underscore the divinely ordained status of the Imams as successors to the Prophet. Shi'i theology also provides a rational basis for the necessity of imamate. Scholars argue that human reason requires a guide to understand divine teaching fully and prevent misinterpretation. They contend that justice as prophets are needed to deliver God's message. Imams are needed to protect and interpret it. This reasoning is part of what is known as divine justice, or the principle that God, in His wisdom, would not leave humanity without guidance. The concept of imamate ensures continuity in divine guidance, which is as essential for achieving justice, preserving faith, and establishing an Islamic social order. In Sunni thought, the concept of imamate or leadership is viewed primarily in terms of governance and is not seen as a divinely appointed role in the same way as in Shiism. Sunni scholars traditionally view the Imam as a caliph or ruler, which primarily duty is to maintain order, justice, and adherence to Islamic law. We can see this sense from almost all definitions gathered by Abdullah Ad-Damiji in his book Al-Imamat al-Uzma inda Ahl al-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah. The appointment of a leader in Sunni Islam typically occurs throughout consensus or community selection, emphasizing practically and consensus rather than divine intervention. This model is grounded in the early Sunni experience after the Prophet's death, where leadership was determined by community consultation rather than explicit divine designation. The Sunni Imam or Caliph serves as the political and administrative leader of the Muslim community. His primary responsibilities include implementing Islamic law, maintaining peace and order, and safeguarding the community from external threats. While the Sunni Imam does not possess the same spiritual authority attributed to the Shi'i Imam, his role is still seen as essential for maintaining religious and social stability. Legitimacy of the Sunni Imam is based on his ability to uphold justice and fulfill communal needs rather than any claims to infallibility or divine knowledge. Sunni sources
Hussein, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We have only 6 minutes left before the end of this session. Could you maybe wrap up your conclusion in 1 minute so that we have 5 minutes more for questions and answers?
Sure. So I should cross over these slides and go to the Wilayat al-Faqih concept group. 1 minute.
1 minute.
Sure. Yes. In Shia Islam, the doctrine of Wilayat al-Faqih, guardianship of the jurist, offers a framework for governance in the occultation of the divinity guided Imam, currently believed by 12 Shia to be in occultation. This concept was further developed by Ayatollah Khomeini, who argued that a qualified jurist or faqih should assume authority over the Muslim community to implement Islamic law and protect its values. The jurist's role, however, is distinct from that of the Imam. While the Imam has divine knowledge and infallibility, the guardian jurist bases his authority on extensive scholarly training in Islamic law, moral character, and community trust. It ensures continuity in religious governance and fills the gap of spiritual leadership in Imam's occultation. Let me go to next slide. From a theological perspective, Wilayat al-Faqih addresses the need for a system that preserves Islamic values in the absence of direct leadership by an infallible Imam. Shia theologians like Sheikh Ahmad al-Ahsa'i argued that in the Imam's occultation, a perfect Shia with complete relation with the Imam are responsible for upholding the community's moral and legal standards. This is a kind of rare theological arguments about this issue jurisprudentially. However, there have been ongoing debate regarding the scope of authority granted to the guardian jurist. Some scholars, such as Sayyid Ahmad Khansari, advocate for a more limited role, primarily focused on religious administration and advisory duties, viewing broader powers and potentially exceeding the jurist in deed scope. Let me cross over the debates about Christianity and Judaism.
Maybe let's stop here, Hussein, otherwise we really don't have any time at all to ask you a question and get an answer.
Sure.
Is that okay?
In 1 minute, I wrap up my discussion. Sorry. While Wilayat al-Faqih provides governance similar to the Imamate, It is distinct from the Shia concept of imamate, as the jurist is not divinely appointed or infallible. This is crucial difference. Shia imamate implies divinely designated leadership with spiritual authority beyond human knowledge, while Wilayat al-Faqih relies on scholarly qualification and community recognition. Interestingly, the Sunni concept of imamate shares more similarities with Wilayat al-Faqih. Both systems lack the notion of divine appointment, focusing instead on practical and social governance. Sunni imamate centers on leadership roles that maintain justice and uphold Islamic law, reasoning with Wilayat al-Faqih's custodial function. This comparison highlights both commonalities and distinctions within Islamic leadership models. And the last slide is for conclusion. And I am here for Q&A. Thank you for your attention.
I believe we have time for one very short question. Yes.
There are others, I guess.
Well, you raise your hand. Sure.
You said the last speaker that, sorry, I'm preparing my talk. You said the Wali al-Faqih does not claim infallibility. So if you read Sahifat Imam, the collected writings of Khomeini, there were instances where Khomeini claimed al-Asma al-Sughra, minor infallibility. How do you respond to that?
I probably need to repeat the question. So the question is, you state, Hossein, that Wilayat al-Faqih does not have the notion of infallibility of Imam. However, in the writings of Khomeini, the idea of a minor infallibility appears. How would you comment on this?
If I understand the question correctly, I said that the infallibility theory is dedicated to Imam in Shia imamate, and sometimes in Sunni theology to the Prophet. I think that there isn't any reason to know and to recognize the Wali Faqih as the infallible one in the jurist's points of views. But sometimes some other people considers infallibility for the jurists of Islamic, for Shiite jurists, and I think this is not found in their books.
When you to read Khomeini's writings more closely.
Would you please
Perhaps
repeat?
you can end at this. The recommendation is to read Khomeini's writings more closely. I suggest that we wrap up here. If you have further comments and questions to Hossein or our previous speaker, you can always post them maybe through Teams, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have any questions, you can direct them to Sarah, and then they will be uploaded to the Teams chat, or if you're already in there, you can do that yourself. I thank both our speakers for their interesting presentations and to all of you for your questions and attention. And with this, we break for lunch. Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good time.
So for lunch, we will be going to the Lipsius building. Lipsius building is opposite of this building. There is a table reserved for us, but you have to